We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the birds, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as a flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the sky, it tells us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as the children raise all their faces to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the trees, they tell us. We are here to be lifted in love. Look at the seas, they tell us. We're here to be lifted in love, to listen to love as the flower raises its face to the sun. We are all one, here to be lifted in grace and love.
Good morning and welcome to First Unitarian's online service. We are so happy that you are here with us today. Our mission at First Unitarian is through spiritual connection and community. We listen deeply to others and ourselves. We are open to wonder and transformation and serve together with love and humility. I'm Shannon Foose, Membership Coordinator, and leading worship today, we have Reverend Sherry Halliday Kwan, Reverend Margalie Belazaire, Reverend Rachel Hayes, and Gregory North. We also have special music from Leah Morris, James Underberg, Paul Thompson, Elizabeth Halliday Kwan, and Rock Opera. Behind the scenes, as usual, we have all our wonderful ushers and greeters making things happen and run smoothly. And we also have our chat chaplain available in case you need to reach out. Right after service, as usual, we will have our coffee and connections and conversation hour.
Hi all, Reverend Sherry here, one of the ministers that leads this congregation, along with Reverend Margalie. And I've got a few announcements. One is, I'm saying goodbye to 2020. I kept my calendar. I know I'm a few days late, but I wanted to do it with you. So that felt really good. Thank you all for doing that with me. Happy New Year. We do, though, bring some things forward from last year. And one of those is our Greater Good Project. So we have continued that tradition here at First Unitarian where we pool our holiday giving and give to two great organizations. And we'll continue collecting funding for that through January 6th. So we'll end that on the 12th day of Christmas, or if you celebrate with Eastern Christianity, I suppose the first day of Christmas, but all the same, Wednesday is our last day for Greater Good, and then we'll be able to distribute those funds to City Roots and Mujeres Divinas of the Worker Justice Center. One final announcement from me. I'm especially pleased to welcome for the entire month of January, folks from Pullman Memorial Church. They're our sibling Unitarian Universalist Church in Albion, and welcome to all of you. We're so glad that you're here with us.
Okay, let us all take a breath together as we settle into this sacred time and place. Please join me in our chalice lighting words and say our unison words together. May the flame we now kindle inspire us to use our power to heal with love, to help with compassion, to bless with joy, and to seek liberation in the fullness of community.
On January 1st, Haitians do not only celebrate the first of the year, we also celebrate Haiti's independence, and honor the ancestors for having revolted and successfully abolished slavery in Haiti on January 1, 1804. At the center of this celebration is a soup joumou, or pumpkin soup. On January 1st, 2021, I made soup joumou for the first time since COVID prevented me from having it at somebody else's home, which is also a tradition, sharing of that soup with others. Lots of visits happened among Haitian households on that day with invitations to stop by for soup. Are you coming for soup? Is heard a lot. Or dropping off of soup. Fully grasping that I would need to make my own soup this year, I decided I would take my time and be deliberate and mindful in my cooking of the soup. I started at about 10:30 a.m. and ended a little bit before 4 p.m. So I practically spent the entire day in my kitchen, which is something I don't remember ever having done before. While browning chicken cubes at the stove, I sat at my kitchen table on Friday, slowly cutting up squash, which serves as the base for the soup, then chopping up and dicing cabbage, carrots, turnips, scallions, shallots, and a couple of potatoes. The store didn't have yams or malanga, which is a root vegetable, or bonnet peppers. I forgot the celery. I used dry instead of fresh parsley. I used chicken instead of beef, which is the meats that's used usually for the soup. And the particular recipe I was following mentioned tomato paste, which I refused to use. Who puts tomato paste in soup joumou? That was news to me. I did not use it. At any rate, I brought all the ingredients together, added spices, and made my soup joumou as imperfect as it might have been. I had soup. I shared pictures of soup with my niece Chloe, who lives in Georgia. Interestingly enough, she was just preparing to drive home after having picked up soup joumou from a Haitian restaurant. And just like that, I was connected to a culture and tradition by performing these simple yet mindful acts. And I think that's why we come to church, to celebrate important and significant shared history, to lift up traditions, even as those traditions change, and to welcome grace in moments of imperfection. Now, please join me in singing our hymn, our next hymn, Bright Morning Stars.
Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright in my soul. Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Oh, where are our dear mothers? Days are breaking in my soul. They are sowing fields of gladness. They are sowing fields of gladness. They are sowing fields of gladness. Days are breaking in my soul. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Bright morning stars are rising. Days are breaking in my soul.
Our first N commits us to give generously of our time, talent, and treasure to make our vision real. I invite you now into the spiritual practice of generosity. Each week, we take up the offering, which is split between our church and organizations and our wider community that leads us in the work of justice and compassion. Today, our collection will be split with RAIN, the Rochester Area Interfaith Hospitality Network. As you know, for many years, RAIN, the Rochester Area Interfaith Hospitality Network, has sheltered families in a rotation of local congregations, among them First Unitarian. During the pandemic, RAIN has continued to serve families and to rely on volunteers and partner congregations in its work. There are several ways to give, including Venmo, Simple Church, or by mailing in a check. Please give generously to support the life-affirming work of Family Promise of Greater Rochester and First Unitarian Church.
When the ground drops out from under you and there's nothing there to hold on to, no, you're not the first to fall right through to a space of mystery, a place of questioning who you are and who you're meant to be. When you can't find home where it used to be, and your roots have faded into memory, no, you're not alone in this new reality. It's a well-trod path traveled by ancestors who came before and show the way. Throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. stepping stone to the journey becomes our home. Some days it feels like searching for water in the sand. Sometimes it feels like falling with nowhere to land. Yeah, there are ups and downs that'll turn you round and round. We come back to the footprints, they're all around. And throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. And we can't do it on our own, gotta find our family in the unknown. And side by side we'll go by, stepping stone till the journey becomes our home. When the walls are closing in, we find our way out through the door into a light that's so much brighter than our hearts have known before. When we heed the call to follow the voice that burns within our core, we join the ranks of seekers, wanderers, and warriors of the soul. And throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find. Throughout time, we've been pushed into the dark, called to find the light within our broken hearts and let it shine. And we can't do it on our own, gotta find our family in the unknown. And side by side we'll go by, stepping stone till the journey becomes, yes, the journey becomes our home.
We begin our time of prayer by lifting up the lives and recent deaths of two people known and loved in this community. Doug Evans and Emil Homerin will be mourned and missed here, even as they and their lives are remembered full of laughter and integrity, passion and gentleness. May we hold their memories with deep love, and may their lives be a testament to our shared mission and purpose.
Dear people of Rochester and the internet, I'm the Reverend Rachel Hayes, and I am so pleased to be with you this morning. I invite you to join me in meditation and prayer. We show up to this moment. We show up as we are to the moment as it is. We show up holding our hurts and our hopes to our chests, like all the hugs that are missing. We show up one breath at a time, one heartbeat at a time. We show up mindful that we have made it to this day. In this precious time together, let us build a silence that is more than the absence of talking, a silence that connects us to each other. into this silence. I invite you to say out loud or type in the chat the name of anyone on your heart this morning, that they might be surrounded by the love of this congregation. May those we have named and those who love them feel our love today. The turn of the calendar year brings us into a reflective posture, taking stock of the year past and setting intentions for the year that has freshly begun. We remember 348,000 people in this country and 183 million worldwide who have died of COVID-19. We hold in our hearts this morning all those who are sick, mourning, lonely, sad, or afraid. May the love that holds us all bring you comfort. We remember those who have died of racist violence and those who have survived racist violence this year. We say the name of Daniel Prude. We affirm that Black lives matter. Black lives matter. We remember that greed, environmental devastation, and individualism made 2020 a much harder year to live through. We also remember that not all of 2020 was bad. Babies were born, people fell in love, learned new things, reconnected with old friends, thought about what really matters to them. All that was hard in the last year will not diminish these joys. And we give thanks for the many ways the glimmers of joy helped us through. As we do every day and every year, let us show up as we are to another year that will be full of surprises. Let us show up holding what we have learned with our intentions to keep growing, learning, opening to the mystery. Spirit of life and love, we show up today. Give us the strength and courage to keep showing up, to cry out for justice, to sing out for love, to wring out greed and oppression, so that we may multiply love, so that we live as though we truly need one another and this world, because we do. In your many names and holy silences we pray. Amen. Blessed be.
When all the world is a hopeless jumble and the raindrops tumble all around, heaven opens a magic lane. When all the clouds Somewhere over the rainbow, way up high, there's a land that I heard of once in a lullaby. Somewhere over the rainbow, skies are blue, and the dreams that you dare to dream really do come true. Someday I'll wish upon a star and wake up where the clouds are far behind me. Where troubles like lemon drops lay above the chimney tops. That's where you'll find me. Somewhere over the rainbow, bluebirds, bluebirds fly, birds fly over the rainbow. Why, and why can't I? If happy little bluebirds fly beyond the rainbow, why, oh, why can't I?
I'll start with a story that feels risky to tell you. Risky because it's a story essentially about a group that I don't belong to. And those of us who are wise know that stories like that, well, they're ripe with potential pitfalls, and yet we Unitarian Universalists, we're implicated in it. So hear me out. Stories like this, we don't know, of course, the complexity of all that I hold with relation to this group. You may think perhaps, well, Reverend Sherry, she's kind, they're loving, compassionate, they would never mean any harm. And yet you might not know that applied to this particular story. And so I ask you to hear it gently and know that this story, and all of us, every group and every person, contains multitudes. When I was in seminary at a interfaith seminary grounded in the Christian tradition, as it liked to name itself, there were a lot of folks raised in more conservative traditions, a lot of self-described evangelicals who found themselves at a fairly liberal or progressive setting and needed to reconcile the culture and theology and beliefs that they grew up with much of what they were learning there. As a Unitarian Universalist whose spiritual worldview had largely been formed in a non-theistic and, quite frankly, often without traditional religious language setting, I too had my own learning and change and navigating to do. And culture clashes. Yes, there were theological clashes, but culture clashes often seemed the most intriguing place of learning for me while I was in graduate school. I remember sitting once on a Friday afternoon with a friend in the lunch area, and another person that we both knew strolled by and turned just as his body had passed us and said, "Hey, everything okay? Are we good from last night?" Without moving, this sentence landed. I was confused, not knowing what he might be referring to, but the person next to me just waved. As the person moved out of earshot, my friend explained to me that this was what he called an evangelical drive-by apology. It's something you do when, having suddenly come from a place where perhaps you didn't imbibe alcohol and suddenly did, you might not know your limits. You might not know that you've gone one drink over. And maybe you said something the night prior that was offensive or hurtful, and you want to apologize, but mostly you just want to make sure that that other person isn't mad at you. It's really just to quell any anxiety around what if somebody is mad at me. The relational grace of that particular culture, this particular setting, suggested that the hard work of a deeply felt apology, well, that's all well and good. But what's important here is just to make sure that you've said the thing that counts as an apology. Now, this was my friend who grew up in a similar setting, and I had no idea what he was talking about and said as much, to which he replied, well, what do Unitarian Universalists do? And I, since we were dabbling in stereotypes, responded in something that contains quite a bit of truth, I believe, though certainly not the whole truth, and I know, and I'm sure you'll all come up with counterexamples. At least I hope so. I explained to my friend that, well, we had the good manners to never mention anything at all and pretend like it didn't happen. Neither of these seem like ideal situations. Neither of these seem like particularly good ways to be in relationship. And yet they are the ways we have. Two tools in our toolbox, but there are others. So a reading from Mia Mingus, who is a disability justice activist, who invites us into regular and sustaining practices of transformative justice. She writes, what if accountability wasn't scary? Take a breath. Let that sink in for a second. What if accountability wasn't scary? It will never be easy or comfortable, but what if it wasn't scary? What if our own accountability wasn't something we ran from, but something we moved toward and desired, appreciated, held as sacred? What if we cherished opportunities to take accountability as precious opportunities to practice liberation, to practice love, to practice the kinds of people, elders to be, and souls we want to be, to practice that which we can only practice in real time. After all, we can only practice courage when we are afraid. We can only practice taking accountability when we have wronged or harmed or hurt. Practice yields the sharpest analysis. Accountability is not a destination, it's a skill we can build and practice. It's an art, a craft, an alchemy we can learn how to wield, just as we have learned how to wield hurt and shame and fear. If accountability is a skill that we value, then we must make room and we must make commitments to practice it ourselves each day, each week, each year. We can start small and build up our skills from there. We can start with our everyday relationships and those closest to us, our families, our friends, our partners, our coworkers, the earth. We can start with our self-accountability and the ways that we don't show up for ourselves. We can acknowledge how most of us are in an abusive relationship with ourselves. We blow past our own boundaries. We punish and beat ourselves up in terrible ways. We can start with the ways we treat and talk to ourselves, ways that we would clearly recognize as abuse if it were being done to another person. After all, our abusive relationship with ourselves lays the groundwork for an abusive world. What if we embraced accountability as a reflection of our undeniable, incredible, tender humanity? As a magnificent example of what it means to be human and flawed and in relationship with one another. What if we welcomed the quickening of our pulse and the beating of our heart as signals of being alive and caring? What if we recognized what's most important to us? What if that were our relationships with ourselves and each other? What if we listened to that fear of losing someone important to us or of losing ourselves? What if we rushed towards our own accountability and understood it as a gift we can give to ourselves and those hurting from our harm? She goes on. It is transformative. Mia Mingus invites us into, quite frankly, a practice that, as much as she invites us to not think of as scary, she names too that we cannot be courageous unless we are afraid. And so I will admit now that our monthly theme of embracing accountability feels awfully scary to me, my friends. I know it doesn't have to be. I know that together we have a shared mission of opening to transformation, and that this work is not some grand destination in the future, but the everyday small shifting practices of transformative justice and mercy. So we come into this Sunday at the start of a new year, and we collectively are cradled by covenant and the relationships that we hold with each other, but we're also held in a culture that invites us, with some sharpness, I believe, to make resolutions. And if you are someone who makes resolutions, someone who's goal-oriented or intention-oriented, I affirm and applaud that. But I know too that many of our resolutions, they lift up some version of ourselves that is so far in the future, or really maybe just a little bit of a tweak of who we are. That's a way of saying to ourselves that we are not good enough now. We are not thin enough or strong enough or smart enough or disciplined enough, not willed enough. I know that what Mia Mingus calls abusive relationships towards ourselves feels like strong language, and that there is a difference between abuse and harm and conflict and disagreement. But I know too that the ways in which I speak to myself are not ways that I would speak to you. And I bet that's true for many of you also. So we come into this Sunday writing the start of a new year. And if we're armed with resolutions that promise perfection, some pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, well, it's time to ground ourselves in those lessons for me of Unitarian Universalism that came to me early in my spiritual formation, that brought to me beauty and truth from science. There is no pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, my friends. The rainbow instead, this process, this journey, that's the destination. That rainbow that contains multitude, merely a trick of light and fragmented tiny bits of water. I know this year has taught us that those tiny bits of water, this way in which we contain multitudes, and we might show them in ways that we weren't quite expecting, Well, those tiny bits of water are not always droplets, but sometimes tidal waves. And it's our job now to find ourselves in the storm. You don't patch a roof if you don't know that it's leaking. And accountability is not a destination, but a skill we build and practice. And so we do this now, this week, the start of our month of embracing accountability, by being accountable to our fullest selves, by knowing that we are both people who are capable of achieving goals, doing good and powerful things, but also people in need of care and love and affirmation. Also people whose bodies hurt, whose bodies are affected by how much water we drink. We do this knowing that each of us contains multitudes, and that telling the truth as often as we can, even when the parts of ourselves contradict each other, is the only way that we make progress in this journey. So I want to start our year by offering what I consider to be part of our Unitarian Universalist canon, a poem that many of us, though I guarantee not all of us, know and love. It's a poem that we often attribute to Rumi, but is so far from the original Farsi that it really can't be called with integrity a Rumi poem without explanation. Accountability demands telling the truth. And as we seek out better translations, more accurate translations, seek out ways in which we do not divorce Rumi from his Muslim identity, we know too sometimes the things that bring us comfort, the things that are familiar to us, that bring us truth and beauty and love and mercy, are flawed and imperfect. And so we leave with a poem translated by, and perhaps quite simply by, Coleman Barks, inspired by the poetry of Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness, some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all. Even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture, still, treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing. Invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond. We go into this year armed with not our perfect selves, not the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, but simply the multitudes that each of us contains. Accountability will demand, friends, that we get to know these parts of ourselves. It is not a destination, but skills needing to be practiced. And this skill, this ability to know ourselves, to be mindful of both the parts we like and the parts we wish were a little bit different. Without this, well, we'll just float away. I trust that we won't. We're on this adventure together. May it be so. Amen. I invite you now to sing, to engage your full body and voice, the imperfect notes and the extremely loud ones, and join with us in singing Wo Ya Ya.
Please join me in saying our chalice extinguishing words. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
We go, friends, along this rainbow road. Go knowing that you contain multitudes, that the many droplets and tidal waves that you contain, that you carry within you, they are blessed, and that you are a blessing to the world. Go doing the work of love. Make music in the heart. Go carrying the work of this community. I love you. Amen.